Jian Wushuang delivered an impassioned speech and spoke with confidence. He spoke with confidence because justice was on his side. There was a drastic change on the ancient battlefield, and Green Fire World had such great value. It was all the work of the Grand Formation. Plus, the Grand Formation did stabilize the space-time storm. If there wasn't the Grand Formation, everything would just be empty talk. However, he didn't share one thing. The Grand Formation wasn't maintained by the energy provided by various resources and treasure. It had merged into one with the space-time storm. Hence, the energy source to maintain the formation was actually with the space-time storm. It was also the brilliant skill of the person who had created this formation, Jian Wushuang's master, Xianxia. Over the years, Green Fire World had been manipulating the formation. In actual fact, they didn't need to spend any resources to manipulate the formation. He had said it required an enormous resource to maintain because he wanted to get more benefits for Green Fire World from the experts before him. Plus, whatever he said, the experts in front of him had to agree. As expected, East Royal Emperor from Sanctuary Alliance, who had studied intensively in formation, spoke. To maintain such a huge formation, the required resources are beyond one's imagination. Even to Sanctuary Alliance, it wouldn't be easy. Green Fire World would require a decent amount of resources and treasure to maintain the formation. It is pretty reasonable. Although the other experts were unwilling, they had no choice but to agree. Sword Emperor, tell us, how many doctrine gems? Ancestor Chen Chen asked. Not many. Any almighty who enters the ancient battlefield once will need to pay 2,000 doctrine gems as payment, Jian Wushuang said. Pay attention. I meant per entry. In other words, regardless of how long you stay, tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, as long as you don't leave, you only have to pay 2,000 doctrine gems. However, if you only stay on the ancient battlefield for a few hundred years or even a dozen years and you leave in between, you will still have to pay 2,000 doctrine gems when you enter again. I will allocate an expert to collect doctrine gems at the space gap that is connected to the ancient battlefield. The experts at the scene exchanged a look and nodded in silence. Only 2,000 doctrine gems, any top chaotic real god who was rich could easily pay. To almighties, it was nothing. So, they could easily accept it. However, it was nothing if there was only one person paying 2,000 doctrine gems. However, the almighties from eternal chaotic world who could wander in this ancient battlefield numbered more than 1,000, and every one of them would pay 2,000 doctrine gem each. It would be a sky-high number if all added up. Plus, if they were to leave in between, they would have to pay doctrine gems again when they re-entered the ancient battlefield. To Green Fire World, it was simply a huge income. Sword Emperor, we agree with your 3 conditions, Ancestor Chen Chen said. Don't be in a hurry. I have a 4th condition. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. More. Ancestor Chen Chen creased his eyebrows. Sword Emperor, don't you have too many conditions? Don't worry. The 4th condition has nothing to do with anyone's benefit. It is merely a personal matter. Jian Wushuang spoke, but his gaze turned cold. Green Fire World, was obviously framed. We were nearly exterminated because of this. I naturally have to deal with this. Hence, my 4th condition is to wish for everyone to tell me, who is it that exposed the existence of the ancient battlefield and then pushed Green Fire World to the toughest point? Jian Wushuang's voice was cold, with a tinge of murderous intention. The experts on the spot let out a breath of relief. They thought Jian Wushuang was going to bring up some strict conditions, but he was merely looking for the person who had exposed the secret of the ancient battlefield. It had nothing to do with them, so they naturally didn't mind. I know that person. There was a cold voice. Everyone looked to the source of the voice. The person who spoke was Colored Glaze Great Emperor. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised at that. Colored Glaze Emperor was the first to reach Green Fire World among all great emperors. Plus, when she reached Green Fire World, she called out his name straight away. She obviously already knew the actual situation in Green Fire World, and someone had definitely told her. The person who spread the news about this ancient battlefield and schemed against Green Fire World is a Sir God in Colored Glaze Sanctuary who has just broken through. Sir God Xuedao, Colored Glaze Great Emperor said. Sir God Xuedao? The experts at the scene revealed confused expressions. They obviously had never heard of Sir God Xuedao. Sir God Xuedao is Emperor God Xiexin's junior disciple. Sword Emperor, You should know why he schemed against Green Fire World, right? Colored Glaze, Great Emperor said. Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold and he understood. Emperor God Xiexin was the first person who had discovered the ancient battlefield. But in the end, he had died by Jian Wushuang's hands. Before Emperor God Xiexin died, he had definitely sent a message to Sir God Xuedao, which had led to the following agenda. As Sir God Xuedao is an almighty from Colored Glaze Sanctuary, I wonder if Colored Glaze Great Emperor would stop me if I wanted to kill him. Jian Wushuang asked. No, Colored Glaze Great Emperor answered. Sir God Xuedao is very cunning. I was framed too. That's great. Jian Wushuang nodded. Sword Emperor, you don't have to do anything about Sir God Xuedao personally. Sanctuary Alliance will figure out a way to capture him alive and send him to you. Even if he is killed by accident, we will send his dead body over too. What do you think? Ancestor Qian Chen said. Thank you, Ancestor Qian Chen. Jian Wushuang thanked him and said, that's all. As everyone agreed with my conditions, let's talk about the territory that Green Fire World will give out. Jian Wushuang immediately started another discussion with the Great Emperors. During the discussion, it was inevitable to go through haggling. But in the end, they reached a mutual agreement. Green Fire World would give 30% of their territory to the junior disciples from various forces in Eternal Chaotic World, then they could continue to reproduce there. Green Fire World was huge and 30% of their territory was huge enough to take on a large number of cultivators. Of course, Sanctuary Alliance and Special Tribes initially wanted more territory, but Jian Wushuang was holding a strong position and it ended up with such an outcome after a fierce negotiation. Then, both parties reached a mutual agreement. Of course, both parties compromised in order to achieve a mutual agreement. However, they had no other alternative but to give way. After all, both parties had scruples. 1982 The origins of Star Foggy Sea. Jian Wushuang represented the entire Green Fire World. Comparing Green Fire World to the entire Eternal Chaotic World, it was at a disadvantage. Green Fire World was too valuable. After Green Fire World was exposed, Jian Wushuang understood that Green Fire World had to give way. He used up all he could to protect the benefits of the cultivators in Green Fire World. Although Green Fire World gave out 30% territory, Green Fire World was finally under his control. They kept the ancient battlefield where the skull was, where the Green Fire World was located. On top of that, experts from various forces had to pay a certain amount of doctrine gems and supplement some resources that Green Fire World needed. That was good enough. As for Sanctuary Alliance and Special Tribe, because they were worried that Jian Wushuang would fight at the risk of mutual destruction, worried about the formation that blended with the space-time storm, they had no choice but to compromise. Dealing with a space-time storm that could instantly wipe out the entire ancient battlefield and all experts at the scene, they couldn't be aggressive. After they reached a mutual agreement, experts from various forces left and made their own preparations. One thing for sure was that Sanctuary Alliance, Special Tribes, and various forces in Eternal Chaotic World had to discuss how many cultivators below real god level could head into Green Fire World. Also, they would have to discuss who would make up the Alliance of 10. All those would go through some arguments. Of course, that had nothing to do with Jian Wushuang. In the lofty palace, Jian Wushuang, Emperor Bai, who closed his eyes and never spoke, finally opened his eyes. Mr. Emperor Bai. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at Emperor Bai. I never thought that your hometown would be on this ancient battlefield. If I am not mistaken, Emperor 13 should be formed on this ancient battlefield, right? Emperor Bai asked. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded. As expected, Emperor Bai smiled faintly. He then said, I heard that your power has improved tremendously over the years. How far away are you from the 7th step? I am very close, Jian Wushuang answered. I see, Emperor Bai creased his eyebrows and said. Although I know it is about luck to break through, I hope you could break through sooner. After all, Eternal Chaotic World is becoming more and more unstable. The two hidden dark forces continuously popped out one after another. If I'm not mistaken, in no time, the two hidden dark forces will take major action. Jian Wushuang was shocked and he immediately nodded. I understand. Jian Wushuang bid farewell soon after. After Jian Wushuang left the palace, he plunged in the direction of Green Fire World. Before he got close to Green Fire World, Jian Nantian, Wang Yuan, Su Ru, and the others who had been waiting for very long in Green Fire World greeted him. Shuang, how did it go? Jian Nantian asked closely. Third brother. The others looked at Jian Wushuang. All their gazes were filled with anticipation. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. It's okay. A simple reply made all cultivators in Green Fire World be filled with excitement. One should know that all of them viewed death unflinchingly and wanted to fight at a risk of mutual destruction. They had already prepared to die in the battle. But then, they were fine? Everything had been solved? Really? Wang Yuan found it unbelievable. Of course, Jian Wushuang smiled and looked at Jian Nantian. Father, please gather all higher-ups in Green Fire World for a discussion. All right. Jian Nantian nodded and immediately went to make the arrangement. Jian Wushuang brought King Luo Yu and Lord Spirit Sound to a remote void. King Luo Yu, Lord Spirit Sound, thank you so much. Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Lord Spirit Sound shrugged but didn't say much. King Luo Yu said solemnly, Sword Emperor, you are welcome. We of Ancient God Tribe value bloodlines the most. You have our royal bloodline and you should be our new emperor. I wonder when Sword Emperor will follow me back to Ancient God Tribe? Ancient God Tribe? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but smile. You can tell that I am very busy now. Wait for a while. Until Green Fire World and the Ancient Battlefield stable down, I will head down to visit Ancient God Tribe. All right, this is my communication token. When Sword Emperor reaches Ancient God Tribe, send me a message directly. King Luo Yu passed Jian Wushuang his token and he left. From the beginning until the end, King Luo Yu had revered Jian Wushuang from the bottom of his heart. After King Luo Yu left, Jian Wushuang looked at Lord Spirit Sound again. Lord Spirit Sound, it has been so long. There are many things that I am confused about. I wonder if you could answer them for me. Sure. Go ahead and ask, Lord Spirit Sound replied with a faint smile. She knew that Jian Wushuang would definitely ask her some questions. She was well prepared. Lord Spirit Sound, you should know what I want to ask, right? Jian Wushuang looked at Lord Spirit Sound. Firstly, it's about where you are from. If I'm not mistaken, Lord Spirit Sound shouldn't be related to Lineage of Star at all. Previously, you said that you controlled Star Foggy Sea to select disciple for Lineage of Star. I'm afraid that's not the truth, right? That's right. I am not related to Lineage of Star at all. As for controlling Star Foggy Sea, someone wanted me to do that, Lord Spirit Sound said. Who? Jian Wushuang asked closely. Xianxia. You should know this, Lord Spirit Sound smiled. Jian Wushuang was surprised when he heard the name Xianxia. As expected, Jian Wushuang sighed. He had already guessed so in his head. As for where I am from, I think you could guess it too. I am from the surrounding battlefield, as are the cultivators from ancient times that you were talking about. However, I was only a small figure in ancient times. I somehow or other got involved in the war back then. Back then, the war darkened the sky and obscured everything. Countless terrifying existences passed away. Although I got involved in the war, I was lucky. At least, I survived, Lord Spirit Sound said. Although I survived, I was in bad shape. I was in a deep sleep in the depths of this ancient battlefield. I had no alternative until I met the mysterious expert named Xianxia. He woke me up and helped me to recover my power. As an exchange, I have to control Star Foggy Sea on his behalf until someone can pass the final test in Star Foggy Sea. Then, I will gain my freedom. As for the excuse of manipulating Star Foggy Sea on behalf of the Master of Star Palace, it was instructed by Xianxia. I don't even know what Lineage of Star is, so why would I control Star Foggy Sea on their behalf? Actually, Star Foggy Sea was in Green Fire World so long ago. It should be Xianxia that took it over through some method. I only needed to take care of Star Foggy Sea on his behalf and lied that I was taking care of it for Lineage of Star. As for the rest, you should know them. Lord Spirit Sound said and then looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and asked, as you are an expert from ancient times, do you not know Xianxia? No, Lord Spirit Sound shook her head. I was only a small figure back then. If I were to be put on the battlefield, I would be just like an ordinary soldier, I might not even be a soldier. But as for Xianxia, although I saw him back then, I felt that he was very weak, his skills were far beyond mine. I am sure that he was a big figure back in ancient times. Such a big figure is not someone I would know. Jian Wushuang was astonished. Lord Spirit Sound and Xianxia were the same. They were only small figures in ancient times. The kind that drew no attention. Jian Wushuang was at least a spy back then. Hence, he had heard of Xianxia. Lord Spirit Sound had never even heard Xianxia's name. I understand now. Thank you for telling me, Lord Spirit Sound, Xianxia said. Like I said, you don't have to be so polite, Lord Spirit Sound smiled. Oh yeah, I'll be staying in Green Fire World for a while. In no time, I will be wandering in the surrounding battlefield. This is my communication token. If you were to run into any trouble, send me a message. Okay. Jian Wushuang accepted the token straight away. In the vast void of Green Fire World, all rulers of various forces in Green Fire World, including the higher-ups, gathered together. In one glance, there were at least a few hundred people. Jian Wushuang sat on a lofty throne right in the middle of the crowd. Everyone, Jian Wushuang's voice was loud and clear. It spread. The experts from Eternal Chaotic World came and cast greedy eyes over Green Fire World and its boundless potential. They attempted in vain to conquer Green Fire World. However, as they are worried about Green Fire World's biggest trump card, they have already retreated. Plus, I had a discussion with them and we compromised and came to a mutual agreement. As for the content of the agreement, Jian Wushuang went through the conditions in detail. Then, the void was in a temporary silence. Give 30% of our territory. Many cultivators in Green Fire World frowned. 30% of their territory was quite vast. Plus, there were countless cultivators that lived in 30% of the territory. To Green Fire World. It definitely was a huge price to pay. However, most of them understood that Green Fire World's strength was weak before various forces from Eternal Chaotic World. They were simply not worth mentioning. If the other party didn't care about Green Fire World's final trump card, Green Fire World might not even have the capital to negotiate. Then, Green Fire World had only lost 30% of their territory and they kept their location at the skull on the ancient battlefield. From then on, they would receive many doctrine gems and resources too. It was already a great outcome. They believed that Wushuang City Master might play a major factor in it. If it was any other person who had gone for negotiation, one should know that the strongest person in Green Fire World was only a real god. A real god dealing with a bunch of almighties and even great emperors might not even lift their heads to look at the other party, let alone bringing up terms and conditions. Only the legendary Jian Wushuang from Green Fire World had the guts and had the qualifications to negotiate with the entire Sanctuary Alliance, the countless experts from Eternal Chaotic World. Father, Brother Wang Yuan, you go ahead and arrange for the 30% territory. Try to complete the reallocation of cultivators in Green Fire World within 100 years. If I'm not mistaken, the cultivators that Eternal Chaotic World sent will be arriving one after another the next few hundred years, Jian Wushuang said. Okay. Jian Nantian and Wang Yuan nodded simultaneously. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and suddenly looked at the cultivators in front of him. Why? Are you not happy with this? Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. He saw many people had lowered their heads. Of course, they were unhappy about it. Green Fire World was their hometown, but they had no choice but to give the other party 30% of their territory. If it wasn't because of their trump cards, the countless cultivators in Green Fire World would have to leave their home to head to other territories. However, they didn't dare to say much. Actually, I feel the same. I am unhappy too. But I have no alternative. We of Green Fire World are at a disadvantage, Jian Wushuang said coldly. Eternal Chaotic World is much bigger than Green Fire World and they have many more experts. Almighties alone, there were more than 1,000 of them from Eternal Chaotic World who came to the ancient battlefield. On the other hand, there isn't even one Almighty that grows up from Green Fire World. Don't look at me. Although I have the power of an Almighty, I really didn't reach the level in terms of the realm. Jian Wushuang paused and then continued, with such power, what qualifications do we have to fight against various forces in Eternal Chaotic World and Sanctuary Alliance? Everyone went quiet. The law of the jungle, they knew the theory very well. Wherever they were, they spoke with fists. Jian Wushuang looked at everyone's expressions and then he smiled. However, don't worry too much. Green Fire World has just started to rise and we are really not comparable to Eternal Chaotic World. However, Green Fire World has great potential, far beyond the cultivators in Eternal Chaotic World. That is also the reason why they tried so hard to conquer Green Fire World. With time, everyone here, including the disciples under your lead, as long as they are willing to put in effort, the overall power in Green Fire World will advance by leaps and bounds. We can take back those that belong to us. Everyone clenched their hands when they heard his speech and their eyes were filled with hope. There was fighting spirit that ignited in their hearts. That scene happened to be what Jian Wushuang wanted to see. Regardless of what Green Fire World went through, it didn't matter. However, the fighting spirit of the cultivators in Green Fire World, their unyieldingness absolutely couldn't be diminished. As long as they continued to grow in their unyieldingness, Green Fire World would reach the level that he was talking about. Then, Wang Yuan spoke again. Actually, although Green Fire World paid a great price, we removed the initial danger anyway. Yes. Jian Wushuang's eyes were shimmering with joy. The danger had been removed. Ever since he found out that Emperor God Xianxia had discovered the ancient battlefield, he had been worried. Especially when the ancient battlefield and Green Fire World was exposed, Jian Wushuang became even more tense as he was worried that Green Fire World would take a damaging hit. He had been trying to figure out ways and he put in his biggest effort. When he was negotiating with experts from Eternal Chaotic World, he was also trying his best to get the biggest benefits for Green Fire World. Then both parties reached a mutual agreement and everything was decided. Although they had given out 30% of their territory, at least they managed to keep Green Fire World. We kept Green Fire World. I managed to keep it in the end. I risked my life back then for Green Fire World. I risked everything for all my ancestors. I didn't disappoint any of you. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. At the same time, his constantly worrying mind finally relaxed. The relief wasn't only in his divine body but he was entirely at ease. But the sudden relief caused Jian Wushuang's heart to skip a beat. This feeling. Jian Wushuang's eyes were wide opened. He had experienced this feeling multiple times ever since he had started cultivating. He naturally wouldn't find it foreign. This was a feeling of having a breakthrough. It was time. He had been in ultimate real God stage for so many years and it was finally time for a breakthrough. 1984 breakthrough. Jian Wushuang had been too tense. He was too stressed. The life and death of Green Fire World had been upon him previously and he hadn't dared to lower his guard and act recklessly. After all, with the difference of one step, Green Fire World would be doomed forever. Now, Green Fire World was finally safe. The danger had been removed and there would be no trouble. Jian Wushuang finally relaxed. However, the sudden relaxation fully enlightened Jian Wushuang. The bottleneck in his body finally loosened up. He was going to break through. I have something urgent. I have to cultivate in seclusion immediately. Father, Brother Wang Yuan, please take care of the rest of the matter, Jian Wushuang exhorted. No problem. Jian Nantian and Wang Yuan nodded heavily. Jian Yi, assist them with all you can, Jian Wushuang commanded. Yes, Master, Jian Yi replied politely. After that, Jian Wushuang immediately returned to his secret room in Wushuang City. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat there while billowing divine power swept out madly. A turning point is hard to come to. If I were to miss it, no one would know how long it would take until I got the next chance. Hence, regardless, I have to break through. Jian Wushuang clenched his hand and closed his eyes. He started focusing on getting onto the 7th step in reverse cultivation. Just as Jian Wushuang was breaking through in seclusion, Green Fire World and various forces in Eternal Chaotic World were making arrangements according to their mutual agreement. Firstly, Green Fire World gave out 30% of their territories. When the higher-ups in Green Fire World announced it and started execution, it stirred up a great commotion within Green Fire World. There were countless cultivators who were raging with anger. especially the cultivators who were located within the 30% territories. There was a vast surge of public feeling. Many of them were unwilling, and they caused short-term chaos within Green Fire World. However, the chaos gradually settled down as Jian Nantian and Wang Yuan led the 9 major forces to suppress and comfort them. The cultivators who were at the bottom might not have known the ins and outs of the story, and thus they couldn't understand. But at least, the cultivators who were more powerful knew how helpless and difficult it was for the higher-ups in Green Fire World. The cultivators who were located within the territories relocated to other region under the allocation of the higher-ups. Within a dozen years, the cultivators within the 30% territory were completely relocated. Besides, the higher-ups from Green Fire World even set up a great formation within the 30% territory. They even told the cultivators from Green Fire World that they were prohibited to step foot in the 30% territory. As for the cultivators in the 30% territory, Green Fire World didn't care if they could exit. After all, besides the 10 Almighties, the cultivators in the 30% territory were all below real god level. Even if they came out, they couldn't dream about making trouble within Green Fire World. Within 100 years, Green Fire World had already completed all necessary arrangements. On the other hand, Sanctuary Alliance, special tribes, and various forces from Eternal Chaotic World went through a dozen discussions, and it took almost a decade until they reached a mutual agreement on the number of cultivators that they could send. Then, only they started preparation. When Green Fire World was ready, they selected 100 million of cultivators from various forces in Eternal Chaotic World to move to Green Fire World. 100 million. Sounded like it was a huge number. However, compared to the boundless cultivators in the vast Eternal Chaotic World, it was so few. It was just like a drop of water in the ocean. In any ordinary big world in Eternal Chaotic World, the number of cultivators was far greater than this number. However, various forces in Eternal Chaotic World knew that the first batch of cultivators to Green Fire World should have higher quality than quantity. In terms of numbers, 100 million cultivators could definitely increase by 10 or 100 times after reproduction. However, various forces had to ensure the first batch of cultivators that they sent possessed a certain level of talent. In other words, the 100 million cultivators had to be geniuses in their own force or sect. A total of 100 million cultivators. Just as they were transporting the 100 million cultivators into Green Fire World, there was a problem that arose. It was their travel route. Various forces in Eternal Chaotic World had originally intended to send their geniuses to Green Fire World through the space gap in Ancient Mystery Land. Very quickly, they realized that it was impossible. After all, the space gap wasn't a wormhole that had stable space-time. Almighties or real gods who were more powerful could rely on their personal power to shuttle through the space gap forcibly. However, the geniuses weren't even cultivators above real god level. How could they travel through the space gap? The 100 million geniuses, there might be 90% of them who would die in the space gap. Just as all forces in Eternal Chaotic World were deeply distressed about that, Jian Nantian informed them another route to enter Green Fire World on behalf of Green Fire World. They had to enter through Dayu World in Snow Kingdom. When they arrived outside the space-time storm, they could pass through Green Fire World formation to enter the ancient battlefield. However, according to Jian Nantian, it wouldn't be easy to open the formation. On top of that, they had to transport a total of 100 million cultivators. Hence, as an exchange, various forces in Eternal Chaotic World paid a large amount of Doctrine Gem to Green Fire World again as compensation. As the 100 million cultivators from Eternal Chaotic World resided in the 30% territory and started reproducing, Green Fire World finally settled down. From then on, Green Fire World and the cultivators living in the 30% territory lived their own lives without getting involved. Both parties were utilizing the environment in Green Fire World to grow. On the ancient battlefield, all experts continued to wander and search for opportunities. However, due to the previous agreement, no Almighties dared to enter the territory where the huge skull was located. Whoever barged in without permission and was detected would be exterminated by Sanctuary Alliance, special tribes, and various forces. No one had the guts to go against the rules. The ancient battlefield finally steadied. The time flew past. In the blink of an eye, the agreement between Green Fire World and Eternal Chaotic World had been running for 3,000 years. Jian Wushuang had also been cultivating in seclusion for 3,000 years until then. Hong! There was loud thunder, and Jian Wushuang, who had been cultivating in the secret room, suddenly quivered and his eyes shot open. There was unprecedented joy in his eyes. I spent 3,000 years and I finally leaped over. Seventh step of inverse cultivation, chaotic supreme. I did it. Chapter 1985 Chaotic Supreme, the seventh step of inverse cultivation. Almighty level. In ancient times, the level was named as Chaotic Realm. In inverse cultivation, it was called Chaotic Supreme. Right at the moment that he broke through and leaped to the step, Jian Wushuang's divine body and divine power was transforming at a shocking speed. Especially his divine body. This feeling? Jian Wushuang was surprised. He realized that his divine body had started collapsing. Yes, collapsing. Without any influence from the outside, he had broken through and his divine body had started collapsing. Of course, such a collapse was necessary to be reborn. Vroom. Jian Wushuang's divine body completely collapsed and became a bolt of energy that dispersed in the void. There was only his heart that was floating in the air, and the heart contained boundless light. Jian Wushuang's consciousness and soul were in the heart too. Then, hualala. An enormous amount of pure energy swept towards the heart from all directions. Jian Wushuang's divine body gradually recovered again. It first collapsed, then recovered. It was reorganization. Divine body reorganization, from limbs and organs to pores and cells, everything resubstantiated. Jian Wushuang also noticed that the reorganization was completely purely with divine power. Merely divine power had substantiated a divine body. Transformation. From the beginning to the end, he had transformed completely. The moment his new divine body was reorganized, Jian Wushuang could tell that his reorganized divine body was unusual. At the same time, Jian Wushuang was recalling the information about the seventh step inverse cultivation. The seventh step of inverse cultivation, chaotic supreme, completed the perfect chaotic divine body. A perfect chaotic divine body would be immune to poison, water, and fire, and be immortal. The biggest difference between a seventh step of inverse cultivation cultivator and an ordinary cultivator was the perfect chaotic divine body. The perfect chaotic divine body was a constitution. A unique supreme constitution that could make everyone feel visibly moved. The constitution was enough to shock the world. Jian Wushuang knew about the seventh step inverse cultivation, and he also knew about the perfect chaotic divine body. However, he didn't know how impressive the perfect chaotic divine body was. Just then, merely at the beginning of his transformation, he was shocked. In the process of his divine body reorganizing, time continued to fly past. In the blink of an eye, 1 month's time passed. His divine body completely reorganized and transformation ended. He truly became an almighty as an inverse cultivator. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang continued to sit cross-legged. Then, both his hands were like lightning. The original 7 ancient tribe star in between his eyebrows became 8. Just as he broke through and reached the 7th step, his ancient tribe bloodline enhanced again in the process when his divine body reorganized. Jian Wushuang didn't bother with the 8th ancient tribe star then, but he focused on his divine body. He looked at his hands as he felt the energy-fueled divine body. His eyes were glistening with joy. This is the perfect chaotic divine body. This is the 7th step of inverse cultivation. Jian Wushuang muttered, and he was excited. He had completed his transformation and he could feel his divine body was special. That was why he was surprised. Let's head out to give it a try. Jian Wushuang suppressed his excitement and appeared in an independent space. Jian Wushuang stood in the boundless dark void quietly while there was another figure in front of him. The person was Jian Yi. 3,000 years passed and Jian Yi's power was only slightly behind his peak status. He would need at least 2,000 years more until he recovered his power to its peak. Jian Yi's fighting power shouldn't be weaker than Abysmal Saint Master when he recovered to his peak. He might even be stronger than Abysmal Saint Master. Jian Yi, give me your all and fight with me. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together when he said. Yes. Jian Yi nodded. Then, Jian Wushuang and Jian Yi launched an attack simultaneously. Jian Wushuang didn't draw his sword and only punched with his right hand. His fist brought about pure divine power after his transformation on the 7th step of inverse cultivation. Hong! A simple punch formed a terrifying storm and tore up the surrounding dark void at ease. Then, it revealed a space black hole that was a few 100,000 miles wide. Jian Yi didn't go easy on him either. He punched and exploded his divine power of one in peak chaotic realm. Both parties didn't use unique skills or secret skills. It was purely a competition of strength. Bang! There was a loud bang and the independent space seemed to have exploded and it trembled in balance. Jian Wushuang's body grew heavy and he took a few steps back. As for Jian Yi, he only took one step back. Judging by his look, it was obvious that Jian Yi had the upper hand. Jian Yi, did you exert all your strength? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, Jian Yi nodded solemnly. Jian Wushuang was surprised when he heard that. Jian Yi was an expert from ancient times. His divine power was extremely pure. Even though he had yet to recover to his peak, his power was stronger than any ordinary great emperor's. But Jian Wushuang's divine power was only slightly weaker when they collided directly. From this result, it could be said that his divine power strength could be comparable to an ordinary great emperor's. I stepped foot on the 7th step and my divine power increased tremendously. Previously, my divine power was at Emperor God level and now I can compare to a great emperor favorably, Jian Wushuang smiled. One should know that it was purely the power of divinity. His strength was not only relying on divine power alone. Jian Yi, let's do it again. You continue to use all your strength but be more careful this time, Jian Wushuang reminded him with a smile. Then, there was billowing divine power concentrating in his right hand. At the same time, his fierce ancient tribe bloodline power had already reached the 8-star level. Come on! Jian Wushuang laughed and took a stride forward. Then, he punched directly without any other moves. Jian Yi also punched like lightning to give full play to his power. Bang! There was another loud bang. However, it was Jian Yi who stumbled and fell backward for quite a distance. Jian Wushuang didn't even take a step back. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang absolutely had the upper hand. As expected. There was excitement glistening in Jian Wushuang's eyes as he looked at his right hand. In terms of divine power explosion, I can compare to an ordinary great emperor favorably. With the addition of ancient tribe bloodline power, my strength might be stronger by a notch than an ordinary emperor god's. Among the 15 great emperors on the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, forget about Emperor Bai for now, my strength might be able to compare favorably with Red Dragon King, who is in 2nd place. Chapter 1986 Unrivaled. Unmatched. Red Dragon King, the 2nd place on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. He was second to Emperor Bai. Red Dragon King was known for his fierce power. The other great emperors, besides Emperor Bai, were all weaker than him. In terms of strength explosion, Jian Wushuang was stronger than an ordinary great emperor by one notch. Although he might not have been able to compare favorably with Red Dragon King, he could at least be his match. Divine power is at this level. Next, let me see my divine body. Jian Wushuang was very excited. His divine body had just been through reorganization. He could feel that his divine body was very strong and peculiar. However, he would need to check to know which level he was at. Jian Yi, hit me with your all, Jian Wushuang said. Attack you? Master, this. Jian Yi creased his eyebrows. When I tell you to, you should just do it. You shouldn't be in doubt. Jian Wushuang smiled and he looked rather confident. Jian Yi didn't hesitate anymore. He moved and appeared before Jian Wushuang. He then punched Jian Wushuang's chest with his right hand. There was a fierce power that formed. Jian Wushuang stood there but didn't move an inch. His divine body wasn't affected at all. Jian Yi, how much strength did you use? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and asked. 50%. Jian Yi answered. He, of course, didn't dare to use his full force when he was attacking his master. Do it again. This time, use full force. On top of that, you can use unique skills, Jian Wushuang commanded. It wasn't because he was arrogant, but he was really confident. At least, the earlier punch was like scratching an itch. He didn't feel it much. Yes. Jian Yi nodded. Jian Yi didn't hold back that time. He used 100% of his strength. There was a cloud churning around his body, and boundless crimson cloud permeated his palm. Hong! The crimson palm slammed into Jian Wushuang without hindrance. The billowing power was terrifying. Even a peak emperor god could be easily killed with that slam. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to dodge the palm at all. Bang! The crimson palm slammed Jian Wushuang, and it was 10 times stronger than Jian Yi's earlier punch. Even so, Jian Wushuang only took 1 step back, and his expression still looked rather relaxed. This palm could barely move me. It is not enough to hurt me. Jian Wushuang shook his head. How about this? Jian Wushuang had a thought in his mind. The 5-gem armor that he had always been wearing shrunk and appeared on his palm. He then put it away in his Qian Kuan ring. I will not wear any armor. I'll just take the hit with my divine body. Give it a try again. Jian Wushuang smiled. 5-gem armor was a treasure given to him by an ancient tribe expert, Wu Hun. Although it was broken, its defensive power was above any ordinary chaotic divine treasure. For instance, 5-gem armor could cut down Jian Yi's attack by 90%. Jian Yi naturally couldn't hurt him. Hence, he wouldn't be able to examine his current divine power's strength. So, he decided to take off his 5-gem armor directly. Master, are you sure about this? Jian Yi hesitated. Don't talk rubbish. Just do it. Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Yi let out a sigh, and he attacked again without hesitation. He used the same move, the same crimson palm that contained terrifyingly strong power. Again, Jian Wushuang didn't block the attack at all. The crimson palm hit Jian Wushuang's divine body again. Hong! The terrifying power impacted Jian Wushuang's divine body. The power strangled everything madly, and it tore a big hole in Jian Wushuang's chest. There were some organs that shattered into pieces too. Master, this. Jian Yi looked distressed. However, Jian Wushuang, who had a big opening on his chest, smiled and said, Don't worry, I won't die. Just as he said, Jian Yi saw Jian Wushuang's divine power churning and recovered his open chest and also the shattered internal organs in an instant. Everything became undamaged again, and Jian Wushuang's fighting power stayed at its peak. Hit me again, and this time hit me harder. It'd be best if you could shatter my divine body entirely. Jian Wushuang looked at Jian Yi. Yes, Jian Yi wasn't in doubt anymore. As Jian Yi launched another attack, Jian Wushuang's divine body collapsed and became a cloud of crimson fog. Under such circumstances, an ordinary cultivator would have been dead. But Jian Wushuang. Vroom! There was boundless divine power that reorganized. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's figure appeared in the void again. As expected, Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. A perfect chaotic divine body is completely substantiated by divine power. As long as divine power is inexhaustible, no matter how great the damage to the divine body is, it can be recovered. Even if my divine body were to collapse entirely, it could be reorganized and resubstantiate with divine power again. Jian Wushuang was filled with excitement. As long as divine power was inexhaustible, even if the divine body were to collapse entirely, it could be reorganized. What is this? This is immortality. Back then, when Jian Wushuang had been on the 3rd step of inverse cultivation, eternal realm, he had a power that was extremely close to immortality. It was an unprecedented life force. As long as there was flesh, he could recover himself with time. However, as he was on the 7th step, he truly possessed immortality. Immortality allowed him to have no scruples during fierce fights. No matter how badly injured he was, even if his divine body collapsed, he could reorganize it and continue to battle. As long as his divine power was inexhaustible, he wouldn't die. Of course, when his divine body collapsed, it would be a huge expense to his divine power to reorganize it. Jian Wushuang noticed that he had used up almost 1/4 of his divine power whenever he reorganized his divine body. In other words, his divine body could at most be reorganized 4 times during a fight. But even so, he could be recognized as being in defiance of nature. He could reorganize his divine body 4 times. It meant that he had 4 extra lives. He could be killed for 4 times. Just how ridiculous was that? Plus, he was only on the 7th step of inverse cultivation and merely the first stage of the 7th step. It equaled Sir God level in almighty rank. Then, he could continue to proceed to the 2nd stage, the 3rd stage. By then, his divine power and divine body would improve further. When he reached the 3rd stage, the final stage of the 7th step, his divine power would be boundless. It would be enough for him to reorganize his divine body a dozen times or more. By then, immune to poison, water, and fire, and his immortal. This is the perfect chaotic divine body. Unrivaled. Unmatched. Jian Wushuang bellowed at the bottom of his heart as his eyes glowed with excitement. Chapter 1987 Exit Seclusion Terrifying. Scary. It was absolutely accurate to describe him as unrivaled. Jian Wushuang finally understood how Emperor Bai could be high and mighty. He understood why the great emperors from the 2nd era didn't even have the courage to taunt him. He also understood why Emperor Bai wasn't afraid even though he had dealt with Emperor 13 and knew that his opponent might be stronger than himself. Because Emperor Bai had been unrivaled long ago. Emperor Bai was also an inverse cultivator and had already stepped foot on the 7th step of inverse cultivation. Plus, he should be on the ultimate stage of the 7th step. His divine power was boundless and enough for him to collapse 10 times and to remain alive. On top of that, he had extremely strong power. Even though his opponent might be much stronger than him, it was absolutely impossible for his opponent to kill him. Because he was invincible, he was unrivaled. I just stepped foot on the 7th step of inverse cultivation and my divine power could only support me reorganizing my divine body 4 times. I still can't be considered undefeatable, but at least I will be fearless towards the 2nd era. Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice. He didn't mention the ancient times or the 1st era. Merely in the 2nd era itself, he was absolutely unstoppable. Dealing with the great emperors in the 2nd era, like Red Dragon King, Abysmal Saint Master, Great Emperor Zishu and so on, even if Jian Wushuang couldn't win against them, he didn't have to be fearful of them, because even if the great emperors were to join forces to kill him, it would still be difficult. Besides, after reaching the 7th step of inverse cultivation, there was a secret skill that Jian Wushuang could perform. The secret skill was naturally the strongest secret skill of body refinery by the ancient tribe, immemorial celestial body. He had obtained the secret skill long ago, but he hadn't had the qualifications to cultivate it. But now, the strongest secret skill of body refinery. Even compared to the secret skills of body refinery from ancient times, immemorial celestial body could be listed in the top 10. Such a secret skill. Even if it is just the 1st volume, it would enable my divine body and divine power to reach a brand new level once I cultivate it. By then, my power will improve tremendously too. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. However, although he had the qualifications to cultivate the secret skill then, he would need some time to cultivate the 1st volume successfully. I shall take my time. After all, I fully comprehended the 1st volume of Immemorial Celestial Body long ago. Even though there are a few procedures that are more difficult, I could definitely cultivate the 1st volume of the secret skill successfully within a few thousand years. Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang understood his constitution of the perfect chaotic divine body and also his current power. He didn't further verify them but exited seclusion. In the lofty hall, Jian Wushuang sat on a throne. Jian Nantian, Wang Yuan, Su Ru, and the others gathered by his side. Shuang, judging from your aura, you've broken through again? Jian Nantian looked at Jian Wushuang as his eyes shimmered with joy. I just broke through. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. That's great. They were thrilled with excitement. Green Fire World finally has an almighty. Wang Yuan cheered. Although Jian Wushuang was attending garrison personally duty in Green Fire World and he had Jian Yi under him, regardless of if it was Jian Yi or Lord Sound Spirit who had assisted Jian Wushuang, they weren't people from Green Fire World after all. It was only Jian Wushuang who was from Green Fire World. Although Jian Wushuang had great fighting power then, he had yet to reach Almighty Realm. Green Fire World had yet to give birth to an Almighty. Now, they finally had. Father, you should be nearing a breakthrough soon, right? I could feel your soul power growing so quickly. I think you should be able to substantiate a substantive soul soon, Jian Wushuang commented. Should be soon. Within 10,000 years, I'm guessing, Jian Nantian replied. Everyone was surprised at having more great news. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows too. All right, everyone, tell me what happened during the time when I was cultivating in seclusion, Jian Wushuang asked. Then, everyone immediately reported what had happened in the past 3,000 years briefly. In the past 3,000 years, Green Fire World had faintly settled down. Various forces and experts from Eternal Chaotic World had sent 10 million geniuses to the 30% territory. After reproduction for 3,000 years, the number had increased by 12 times. Just as Jian Wushuang had expected, the people who were born in Green Fire World were much more gifted than those who had been born in other parts of Eternal Chaotic World. Plus, they were getting more and more outstanding through the generations. The 30% territory was given a name of Myriad Noble Region, while the remaining 70% territory was known as Green Fire Region. The two territories were bound by the agreement, and they hardly had dealings with one another. They naturally had conflicts. On top of that, cultivators from both parties were growing at a shocking speed. Especially the geniuses. There were too many geniuses across Green Fire World now. It included many who possessed special constitutions. However, because there were too many geniuses, most of them would opt to train themselves in Eternal Chaotic World after they reached Universe God level. On the ancient battlefield, the passion of the experts from Eternal Chaotic World to wander didn't diminish even though 3,000 years had passed. There was a continuous appearance of multiple opportunities. There were many amazing ones too. It even stirred up many battles and countless experts fought over it. However, the occurrence of battles in order to get opportunities and treasures was only right and proper. All in all, it wasn't too drastic of an incident. Everything was calm. Jian Wushuang understood what had happened in the past 3,000 years briefly, and he didn't ask further. He had already passed down the affairs of Green Fire World to his father, Jian Nantian, Wang Yuan, Su Ru, and the others. Then, Jian Wushuang went to see 3 other people. They were Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Jiu Xin, and Hall Master Nai Yun. The 3 Hall Masters of Lineage of Star were there, in Green Fire World. According to the agreement, besides the 10 Almighties who were in charge of looking after Myriad Noble Region, the other experts from Eternal Chaotic World above Almighty level were prohibited from entering Green Fire World. However, the 3 Hall Masters were special. That was because the 3 of them were Jian Wushuang's men. Hence, Jian Wushuang had already sent a message for Wang Yuan to bring the 3 Hall Masters into Green Fire World when he knew they had arrived. Palace Master, you have finally exited your seclusion. Hall Master Jiu Xin was obviously excited to see Jian Wushuang. Palace Master, your aura, did you break through again? Hall Master Yuan's eyes glowed. I did. However, you don't have to announce this. Only the 3 of you need to know this, Jian Wushuang smiled. That's great. The 3 Hall Masters were thrilled with joy. They knew that Jian Wushuang could suppress Emperor God when he was at real God level. Then, as he broke through and leaped on the 7th step of inverse cultivation, his power had definitely improved tremendously. They believed that he could compare to a great emperor favorably with his power. Great Emperor. Lineage of Star finally had a great emperor. How could they not be excited? Chapter 1988. Losers are always in the wrong. How are our guest elders in Lineage of Star doing? Jian Wushuang asked casually. Guest elders? Hall Master Yuan and the other Hall Masters exchanged a look. Then, Hall Master Yuan answered, the guest elders in Lineage of Star aren't restrained. When they found out about the news regarding the ancient battlefield, many guest elders couldn't hold back. Even though he gave out the command personally to prohibit them from stepping foot in the ancient battlefield, they agreed on the surface. However, many guest elders went over in secret. Only Emperor God Ju Yin, Emperor God Shen Wu and 2 Sir Gods followed your command. This is within my expectations, Jian Wushuang smiled. When he gave a command to the guest elders, it was because he knew he might need them. But in actual fact, the danger in Green Fire World didn't need Lineage of Star to get involved at all. Those guest elders who followed my command can enter the ancient battlefield and Green Fire World as they wish. As for those who didn't obey my command, ignore them. The danger in Lineage of Star has been removed long ago. Those guest elders that didn't act according to my instructions will only become our burden if they continue to stay in Lineage of Star, Jian Wushuang said. I understand. I thought the same too. Hall Master Yuan smiled faintly and said, Palace Master, I have an idea. I wonder if I should say this. Tell me, Jian Wushuang said calmly. Green Fire World is Palace Master's hometown, and they follow your lead. Similarly, Lineage of Star views Palace Master as our leader as well. Palace Master, do you think you could get more resources from Green Fire World on behalf of Lineage of Star? Such as, moving the old lair of Lineage of Star, Universe Galaxy, to Green Fire World? Hall Master Yuan asked. Hall Master Jiu Xin and Hall Master Nai Yu looked at Jian Wushuang with anticipation. 3,000 years had passed and the unique characteristics of Green Fire World were revealed. Everyone knew that Green Fire World was a true cultivation sanctuary, the cradle of geniuses. Countless experts were dying to cultivate there. However, the territory was only that big and there was a limit to the number of people who could enter to cultivate. Because of Jian Wushuang, many core disciples, including experts from Lineage of Star, could enter Green Fire World directly. However, the freedom to enter and exit wouldn't be as great as moving the old lair of Lineage of Star over directly. Hearing what Hall Master Yuan said, Jian Wushuang was surprised. Actually, after Jian Wushuang had found out how powerful Universe Galaxy was, he had the same idea. However, it was unrealistic back then. Hence, he didn't consider it again. But then, needless for him to say, the three Hall Masters suggested it instead. Jian Wushuang naturally could make it happen. I will immediately make some arrangement for Green Fire World to empty parts of the territory as the old lair of Lineage of Star. However, Universe Galaxy is so huge, it wouldn't be easy if we wanted to move it here, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Palace Master, you don't know that although Universe Galaxy looks huge, it is just a unique treasure after all. Palace Master, you could refine Universe Galaxy and bring it to Green Fire World. Then, expand it gradually. Hall Master Yuan smiled. He was Universe Galaxy's weapon spirit. He naturally knew Universe Galaxy the best. That's great. Hall Master Yuan, you go ahead and make preparations then. When everything is ready, I will return to Starland to move Universe Galaxy over, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Hall Master Yuan nodded heavily. Then, Hall Master Jiu Xin and Hall Master Nai Yun left too. As for Hall Master Yuan, his original body had stayed in Universe Galaxy as he couldn't leave. The one that appeared in Green Fire World was merely an incarnation that had formed temporarily. When the discussion ended, Hall Master Yuan's incarnation dispersed. In the void outside Green Fire World, a cold-looking middle-aged man, Emperor God Shiyu, stood and waited in silence. Then, there was an elder in Taoist robe that walked out from Green Fire World. The elder in the Taoist robe was Jian Yi. Shiyu under colored glaze Great Emperor greets Mr. Jian Yi. Emperor God Shiyu bowed politely. Although Jian Yi was only Jian Wushuang's sword servant, his power was on display. He was a true great emperor. Hence, Emperor God Shiyu, of course, had to treat him with respect. This is what my master told me to deliver, Emperor God Shiyu said as he offered an ancient black tower. The black tower looked ordinary, but it was actually a powerful suppressing treasure. There was a person in the black tower. The person was naturally Sir God Shui Dao. Sir God Shui Dao spread the news in Eternal Chaotic World back then. He was the culprit who had pushed Green Fire World to breaking point. When they had been discussing terms and conditions back then, Jian Wushuang had said that he wanted Sanctuary Alliance to find the person who spread the news and send him over. Sanctuary Alliance naturally did it. Sir God Shui was very cunning and he was well hidden. In front of Sanctuary Alliance, he had nowhere to hide. He was found very quickly and suppressed. Then, Emperor Shiyu sent him over personally after they had found out that Jian Wushuang had exited seclusion. You can leave him here. Then, you can leave. Jian Yi glanced at Emperor God Shiyu. Emperor God Shiyu nodded and let Sir God Shui Dao out. After that, he bowed to Jian Yi and in the direction of Green Fire World. Then, he left. In the vast void in Green Fire World, Sir God Xuedao with crimson hair and a crimson robe was tied up. Even his divine power was restrained. He couldn't even use any strength. He looked hopeless then. Vroom. There was a figure that slowly appeared before Sir God Xuedao. You are Emperor God Xiexin's junior, Sir God Xuedao? Jian Wushuang looked cold as he looked down at Sir God Xuedao. Of course, Jian Wushuang didn't hate Sir God Xuedao as much as before. Although Sir God Xuedao framed him and schemed against Green Fire World, he was actually taking revenge for his senior after all. Jian Wushuang. Sir God Xuedao stared at Jian Wushuang. There was hatred in his eyes, but there was even more helplessness and unwillingness. He was only a Sir God. It was absolutely impossible for him to kill Jian Wushuang. He could only rely on the scheme. He had put in his greatest effort to scheme against Jian Wushuang. He had even led various forces in Eternal Chaotic World to Green Fire World. However, he had never expected that Jian Wushuang would survive even when he fought against the entire Eternal Chaotic World. You and I share no resentment. You are only taking revenge for your senior. You have your reasons to scheme against Green Fire World and I, but I have my reasons to kill your senior, Emperor God Xiexin as well. Hence, there is no right or wrong between us, but losers are always in the wrong. Chapter 1989 Sword Geek Losers are always in the wrong? Sir God Xuedao trembled and he couldn't help but lower his head. He lifted his head at the next moment, but then he shouted hysterically, Jian Wushuang, you are great, but don't get too carried away. I am going to die at your hand. But in no time, you will absolutely die at another person's hand. It is only a matter of time. You will have to die. Sir God Xuedao was frenzied. Jian Wushuang saw and shook his head. There was sympathy in his eyes. Don't worry, I won't torture you. Go in peace. Jian Wushuang said and then pointed casually. There was a ray of light that pierced Sir God Xuedao's head straight away. Sir God Xuedao died on the spot. Jian Wushuang's face turned cold at the sight. Maybe you are right. It is only a matter of time until I die by someone else's hand. However, as long as the day has yet to come, I will try my best to improve my power. I will try my best to protect everything around me, Jian Wushuang muttered, and there was determination in his eyes. Just then, vroom. There was a loud whistle from the sword. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at Blood Mountain Sword on his back and he realized that Blood Mountain Sword was quivering vigorously. Jian Wushuang was connected to Blood Mountain Sword at heart. At that very moment, he could feel how excited Blood Mountain Sword was. It was definitely because something impressive had appeared. What happened? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Ever since I received Blood Mountain Sword from my master, this is the first time Blood Mountain Sword is acting this excited. It isn't even a fierce fight, but it got excited without showing any sign. If I'm not mistaken, it should have sensed the existence of something. Jian Wushuang thought for a while, then he took out a token to ask. Very soon, he found out the reason behind it. Earlier, when had he killed Sir God Xuedao, there had been an ancient cave dwelling that had come into the world in the nearby ancient battlefield. In the ancient battlefield, there was a variety of opportunities. There were naturally many cave dwellings that had been left behind by experts from ancient times. In the 3,000 years that Jian Wushuang had cultivated in seclusion, more than a dozen of cave dwellings were discovered in the ancient battlefield. Every time an ancient cave dwelling came into the world, it would stir up a fight among the experts. However, the opportunities in the cave dwellings, some were taken away, but most of them remained in the ancient cave dwellings. It wasn't because the experts from Eternal Chaotic World didn't want the opportunities, but because they couldn't get them. The ancient cave dwellings contained a test. The tests were mostly very strict and no one could pass them. Hence, the opportunities that came along with the tests were naturally untouched. In the ancient cave dwellings that had just come into the world, there were a few experts that had actually gone in by accident previously and obtained some opportunities. However, as the opportunities were taken, the cave dwelling finally came into the world and it stirred up a shocking commotion, especially towards sword principle cultivators. When the ancient cave dwelling came into the world, not only Jian Wushuang, but also all sword experts who were wandering on the ancient battlefield, their divine weapons sensed it and naturally notified their masters. Ju Sword Mansion? The ancient cave dwelling is named as Juju Sword Mansion. Jian Wushuang went through the information that he had just obtained from Sanctuary Alliance. The first batch of experts who found the ancient cave dwelling naturally had a basic understanding of the ancient cave dwelling. They knew the origins of the cave dwelling, and they also knew the opportunities within. Juju Sword Mansion contained boundless variations of sword principles. The sword principles were stored on 9 sword steles in a peculiar way. The 9 sword steles contained Juju Sword Mansion's biggest opportunity. However, the 9 sword steles were scattered in 9 corners of Juju Sword Mansion. It wouldn't be that easy to get them. In the beginning, the experts who discovered Juju Sword Mansion had found a sword stele by accident. Hence, it had led to the birth of Juju Sword Mansion. It is obvious that Juju Sword Mansion is aimed at sword cultivators. The 9 sword steles contained a large amount of sword principles. These sword principles are all from ancient times. Jian Wushuang licked his lips and he was obviously tempted. His power had reached such a level. Although he could rely on himself to create a sword-unique skill that was powerful, it was limited. Compared to the shocking sword principle from ancient times, his unique skills were inferior. Hence, if he were to master a few sword principles from ancient times, it would absolutely raise the power of a sword cultivator. Just like the number sword cultivator in the First Era, Sword Emperor Dugu. Although he was gifted with sword principle and he had created a sword principle that was suitable for him, his biggest trump card was still King Sword Principle. It was his true power that swept all obstacles away and enabled him to march over the First Era unhindered. King Sword Principle originated from ancient times. Although Jian Wushuang had already mastered the sword principle, it wasn't easy to perform it. On top of that, he had only mastered the first move. So, he could only use it as his trump card. The sword principle from Sword Mansion Juju was different. The 9 sword steles combined large amounts of sword principle from ancient times. Every sword stele contained a large amount of ancient sword principle. To Jian Wushuang, it was extremely attractive. Jian Wushuang called. Master. Jian Yi's figure appeared next to Jian Wushuang. Have you heard of a sword expert named Juju from ancient times? Jian Wushuang asked. Juju? Sword geek Juju? Jian Yi looked surprised. It seems like you heard of him. Tell me about him. Jian Wushuang was interested. Master, I have heard of Juju. Among solo experts in ancient times, he was considered as a top-grade sword expert. Unless it was necessary, the top forces in ancient times wouldn't offend such an expert casually. Besides, Juju was known as Sword Geek. He truly was geeking out over swords. He was passionate about gathering sword principles, and he wasn't interested in ordinary sword principles, only in sword principles that were exquisite and brilliant. For that, he often challenged the sword experts in ancient times. When he challenged them, he liked to bet with rare sword principle books. If his opponents lost, they had to hand him their strongest sword principles. Over the years, he collected many powerful sword principles. That is also the story of how got his name, Sword Geek. In ancient times, he might have been the one who was proficient in the most sword principles. Many sword experts who were more powerful than him didn't know as many sword principles as he did. Chapter 1990. Juju Sword Mansion passionate about gathering exquisite sword principles, and he constantly challenged many sword experts to bet with sword principles. He was truly a sword geek. Jian Wushuang smiled. However, regardless of if it was sword principle, saber skill, or other secret skills, it would be about quality over quantity. Even though he mastered countless sword principles, there were definitely many sword experts who were more powerful than he was. That's true. This sword geek, Juju, was considered a top-grade expert in ancient times. But there was a distance between him and the peak in ancient times. Jian Yi smiled. However, if he were to be put in this era, Juju would definitely be a high and mighty existence. There were many great emperors in this era that would only be a nuisance in front of him. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, but he could understand why. Anyone from ancient times was, of course, not someone anyone in the Second Era could compare to. The sword geek, Juju, was definitely a top-grade expert in ancient times. If he were to be in the current era, he could march over unhindered. Regardless, Juju definitely possessed a bunch of sword principles. To me, they would definitely be useful. It seems that I have to fight for the 9 sword steelies too. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Jian Wushuang made up his mind and immediately instructed, Jian Yi, you stay back to look after Green Fire World. I will make a trip to Juju Sword Mansion. Master, you don't need me to go with you? Jian Yi asked. There's no need to, Jian Wushuang waved. Ever since he had broken through to the 7th step and possessed the perfect chaotic divine body, he had been different from before. He might have yet to catch up with Jian Yi in terms of power, but in terms of defensive power, even 10 Jian Yis wouldn't be his match. He would be able to deal with everything if he headed over to Juju Sword Mansion alone. If he really couldn't survive when he ran into danger, the outcome would be the same even if Jian Yi helped. Jian Wushuang didn't delay any further but departed. Juju Sword Mansion isn't too far away from Green Fire World. If I rush my journey at my top speed, I will be able to reach it in a few days. I should be able to make it in time. Jian Wushuang was looking forward to it as well. In the ancient battlefield, not only him, but also many sword experts, who had sensed the birth of Juju Sword Mansion, received the news and rushed over simultaneously. There were even experts who didn't have expertise in sword principles that rushed to Juju Sword Mansion. The 9 sword steelies might be useless to cultivators who weren't good at sword principle. However, if they could obtain it and sell it, it absolutely could be exchanged for abundant resources. Hence, there were countless experts that swarmed over it like bees. In a barren land with no vigor in sight. Then, there was a tall pavilion towering in the barren land above. The pavilion door was wide open and it was mysterious. Swoosh! Swoosh! There were 2 figures standing side by side outside the pavilion. The 2 Sir Gods appeared and glanced at the pavilion before they entered it. There are another 2 who want it. Including the 2 of them, there are more than 100 experts in Juju Sword Mansion. There are 105 of them. I reckon there are still people who are rushing here. There were 2 purple-robed figures hiding in the void outside the pavilion. They were paying close attention to the pavilion. The 2 of them were assigned to watch the pavilion by Sanctuary Alliance. Not only outside the pavilion, but there were also experts that were assigned to watch from within as well. Sanctuary Alliance would pay close attention to whichever cave dwelling came into the world or any opportunity on the ancient battlefield once it was announced to the public. For instance, Sanctuary Alliance was very concerned about Juju Sword Mansion then. Just then, swoosh! There was a flash of flowing light that burst out of the nearby void. It didn't stop but leaped into the pavilion without any pause. The 2 purple-robed figures stared at the pavilion with their eyes wide open. This speed is so fast. This is too fast. Even an ordinary Emperor God wouldn't be able to achieve such speed. He at least should be a peak Emperor God to travel at such a speed. However, the person who just entered, I didn't see his face but his aura was only of a Sir God. That's weird. Although he was confused, he didn't think much. It looked like it was only a pavilion but it was a mystery inside the pavilion. It was a huge, barren world. The world was so huge that no one could see its border. This is Juju Sword Mansion? Jian Wushuang smiled while he looked around. The biggest opportunity in Juju Sword Mansion is definitely the 9 sword steelies. Of course, there are only 8 left. The 8 steelies are scattered to 8 different corners. I have to take time to find them, Jian Wushuang muttered and plunged to another direction in the void. He wasn't sure of the structure and environment in Juju Sword Mansion, so he could only wander around. But it was not long after he entered Juju Sword Mansion. Hong! There was a vigorous roar that sounded from the void afar. At the same time, there were ripples of divine power. The loud roar and the ripples of divine power, Jian Wushuang naturally didn't find it foreign. I just entered Juju Sword Mansion for a while. I shouldn't reach the 8 sword steelies so soon, right? But the ripples of divine power are obviously from a pitch battle. Jian Wushuang was surprised. He didn't hesitate but plunged in the direction of the source of the divine power ripples. At the end of the direction in which Jian Wushuang plunged, swoosh! Swoosh! There were 2 figures, a male and a female, traveling forward at a high speed. The 2 of them looked terrified and judging from their traveling speed, they were running for their lives. Behind the 2 of them, There was a figure that carried an aura that had reached the level of Emperor God who caught up with them. Mo Yu, I'm sorry that I dragged you down with me, a middle-aged man said as he wielded his sword and carried 2 on his back. It meant that he had carried 3 on his back originally. Now, he was soaring with rage and there was fire burning in his eyes. You and I are best friends and we are wandering together. We naturally have to go through trials and tribulations together. Why did you apologize? It's just that we never expected that the golden-headed lion would be so persistent. So God Mo Yu in a simple grey robe clenched his teeth and spat angrily. Blame me. I shouldn't have offended the golden-head lion back then. He is a madman. A madman. The middle-aged man carrying 3 swords said, Forget about that for now. We have to figure out a way to shake off the madman. Otherwise. Sir God Mo Yu was distressed. Although both of them were powerful Sir Gods, the one who was after them was an Emperor God, a mad Emperor God.